Well, I live near 9/11, near where everything happened. We're in North Jersey, right outside New York City. So you could see everything happening that day. The woman who was supposed to be my wife, who was going to be my wife, was supposed to be there that day at Ground Zero, at the bottom of the World Trade Center, but her plans were canceled at the last minute. So it was really we were in the shadow of it. And so I was praying. I felt a deep sense that there's something very, not only calamitous, but prophetic here. And so I prayed. And I was led to a passage or a section of scripture of ancient Israel, Isaiah 9 and 10, where Israel was given its first warning. It was a warning strike that came upon the land. And it was a warning before its destruction. So I got that. And then later on, I was standing at the corner of Ground Zero, and I noticed an object. My attention was drawn to that, and something said, follow that. And it became the first puzzle piece of this unfolding mystery, this ancient mystery that kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it was kind of blowing me away. And that became the beginning of the Harbinger, and I shared it in the congregation here at Beth Israel. Everybody was stunned and said, this word has to go out. I didn't do anything for a while, but then I was led to put it in a book form. So I started writing it, and then when it was finished, I was led to rewrite the whole thing, and it was a scripture that said, a wise man makes knowledge attractive. And what I was led to do is to put it into a form of a narrative. All the revelations and the mysteries of the Harbinger are in the book, but it is surrounded and given through a narrative, through a man called a prophet, a man called Noriel, and through 9 seals which reveal 9 mysteries. And once I started writing like that, it just flowed out as if it had already been written. And it happened so fast. I mean, I don't have much time in ministry to do this, but within 3 months the thing was done. And then I had to figure out how to publish it, and it was a very supernatural thing that happened. I just finished the book, and I said, okay, what do I do now? I've never written a book before, and I was told most publishers don't publish most books, and certainly not first-time authors, so they didn't know me. And I got different advice, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. Promote yourself, I'm not doing that. And so at the end of that week, when I finished it, I was scheduled to go to Promise Keepers to speak in Dallas at the Promise Keepers there. And the plane went to Charlotte for a cross flight. And so I'm in the airport, and it's my first chance to really just kind of rest. And I hadn't prayed. I had a burden to lift this to God. So I just bowed my head in the airport. I said, Lord, if this is your will, and this is your word, so you have to get it out. I don't want it to go out the way of man. This is your message. You send it out to the nation and do it your way by your hand. That was it. I had a little Bible, and I opened up my eyes, and there's a man sitting next to me, and he turns to me and he said, so what's the good word? I said, well, God loves you. I was witnessing to him. He said, no, I know that, but what's the good word? And he starts talking to me, and then all of a sudden, as he talks, he begins to prophesy over me. He begins to speak prophetically, and he starts telling me, you are going to publish a book, and this book is going to be a big thing. God is going to change things through this. He's going to change your life. All these things are going to change. And he goes on, and I'm quickly got a pen, and I'm writing it down. And it turns out that this man was just brought in touch with Stephen Strang, who's the president of Charisma Publishing, one of the big Christian publishers. And not long after that, I get a phone call and said, this is Steve Strang, and I heard about what happened at that airport. I heard about the Harbinger, and we're interested. And so that's how the Harbinger got published. I didn't go to any publisher. I didn't do anything but bow my head in that airport, and God did it completely supernaturally. Everything that happened, I did nothing. And it turns out, that this man, he's a believer, and he saw me, and he said he heard the Spirit say, you have to speak to him. And he looked at me and said, this guy looks Jewish. He said, I don't want to prophesy over him. And he thought I was like davening, because I had the thing that, little prayer book or the little Bible. It was just amazing. And it's totally, everything has been with the Harbinger has been like that, has been his hand, not my hand. It paralleled the book, because in the book, the first encounter is this man, Noriel, sits down in a public place, and to his left is this other man who is called the prophet with this prophetic gift. The other man initiates a conversation with him. They're talking, and then all of a sudden the prophet starts prophesying over him, a prophecy that's ultimately going to lead this man to write a book that's going to go to the nation. So it's like God recreated the book. It's almost like the book prophesied its own publishing. God used it to get the book published. So the whole thing was a supernatural enterprise. The Harbinger is about an ancient mystery that is 2,500 years old, that lies behind everything from 9/11 to the war on terror, to the economic collapse, the crash of Wall Street, the Great Recession, everything that's happening will happen. And it all goes back to this mystery in the Bible, to Israel, to ancient Israel. And it begins with 9 harbingers, that in the last days of ancient Israel, a nation that had known God, had been founded by God, but turned away from God, and was now being warned, these harbingers are given. Harbinger is a foreshadow or a prophetic warning. And so these 9 harbingers appear to warn Israel and to call it back. And the eerie thing, or the scary thing, or the amazing thing is that those same 9 harbingers are now reappearing, but now to America, on American soil. And it begins with this first act, or this first breach, where the nation's hedge of protection is removed. And with Israel, it was actually a strike of terrors by the Assyrians, who invented terror. So this was a terrorist strike. And they came into the land. It was temporary, limited. They withdrew. Then there was this grace period. It was like years where they hung in the balance to come back to God or not. It was a wake-up call because nothing else would reach them. Ancient Israel, when this happened, instead of repenting and coming back, they defied God. They made a vow. It's in Isaiah 9:10. They said to God, basically, you're not going to humble us. We're not going to turn back. We're going to keep going, and we're going to actually go against you even stronger than ever. And the vow is, the bricks have fallen in this attack, but we will rebuild with hewn stone. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will plant cedars in their place. We're coming back stronger. So they vow, and this vow is ominous because it sets the course to judgment. And from this vow come the appearance of these harbingers. So America is now the nation that was also founded to fulfill God's will. America has known God, has been blessed by God more than any other nation in the modern time, but it has also is turning rapidly away from God and his ways. And so here's what happens. The first harbinger appears September 11th, 2001. The nation's hedge of protection is removed. It's, again, a terrorist strike. It is limited and contained, just as with Israel. Then it's withdrawn, and now we have this period of years we hang in the balance. And the thing is that America, just like ancient Israel, has followed the exact course. Instead of repenting, I mean, there was calls for repentance, and people were flocking to houses of worship for about 3 weeks, but there was no change. And if anything, we've gone farther away from God since then. So now the same harbingers start reappearing in America. And there's so much, and there's so many, and there's so much to it in the book. I'll just touch on some a little bit. One harbinger, the 5th harbinger is the stone of judgment. And that's right in the vow of Isaiah. The bricks have fallen, but we will rebuild with hewn stone. In Hebrew, the word is gazit, stone. And what that means is a quarried stone out of mountain rock. What happens is the ancient Israelites, they clear the clay bricks away. They go to the mountains, they quarry out this massive rectangular block of stone. They bring it back to the ground where the bricks have fallen. They lay it down. They vow they're going to rebuild their nation stronger than ever. It becomes the stone of defiance. So what does that have to do with America? After 9/11, in a mountain upstate New York, the people of New York go up there, they quarry out a stone. It's a giant, massive 20-ton rectangular block of stone. It's a biblical gazit stone. They bring it to New York, then they bring it to the ground of destruction, where the bricks have fallen. They bring it to ground zero. They lower it onto the pavement. They have a ceremony around the stone with leaders of New York and New Jersey and American leaders. And what they do is they vow vows of defiance over the stone. We're going to come back stronger than ever. This stone is a symbol of it. They don't realize what they're doing. They're reenacting an ancient drama judgment. And now the next one, just go right down the line. It says, then the sycamores have fallen. Next sign. 6th sign is the sign of the sycamore. The sign of a tree being struck down. Well, when this attack came on Israel, they didn't just strike the cities, they struck the land. And they strike down the trees, particularly the sycamore. The fallen tree is a symbol in the Bible of judgment. God says, I'm going to uproot you if you don't come back to me. You're going to be uprooted. So this is the sign of the sycamore, and what would this have to do with America? I mean, if you're looking for a tree, the first place you go is not New York City, and the terrorists are not trying to do it to fulfill anything. But here's what happens, an eerie thing. In the last moments of 9/11, as the tower comes down, it sends forth a shock wave, and it sends forth a beam, and it strikes an object that just happens to be at the corner of ground zero. It's a tree. What kind of tree? It's the sycamore. The sycamores are fallen. The sycamore is struck down. The people of New York make a symbol out of it. They call it the sycamore of ground zero. They put it on display. They have no idea. This is the biblical sign of judgment. Everything's following Isaiah, the vow, like step-by-step progression. Nobody's trying to do it. The next part of the vow says the sycamores have fallen, but we will plant cedars in their place. Another act of defiance. Hey God, you think you're humbling us? This is fallen. Well, we're going to take another tree, plant it right where it fell, and it's going to be not a sycamore, it's going to be a stronger tree, because we're telling you we're now going to be even stronger against you. So it's a cedar. So in Hebrew, of course they didn't speak English, they didn't say cedar. The word is erez, an erez tree. And that can mean a cedar, but it literally means a pine or conifer. Literally, panacea tree is the best definition of it. So for this harbinger, the seventh harbinger, to manifest, now they would have to clear away the sycamore. They would have to take another tree, plant it right where it was, and that tree could not be a sycamore. It would have to answer to the same biblical tree of Isaiah 9, this harbinger. And so what happens is, 2 years after 9/11, a tree appears in the sky at the corner of ground zero, coming down, lowered by a crane. They're guiding it to make sure it goes exactly into a specific spot. That spot is the exact soil where the sycamore had stood. And so they're replacing the sycamore of ground zero with another tree. What kind of tree? It's not a sycamore. It is a conifer. It is a panacea tree. It's the sister tree of the cedar of Lebanon. It is the biblical erez tree, the harbinger. And they have a ceremony around the tree. They call it the tree of hope, and they proclaim they're replacing the one with the other, the exact thing of Isaiah, having no idea what they're doing. It all just keeps manifesting. Then it gets even more eerie. I'll give one more, and there's more than 9. But the other one is the vow itself, because the speaking of this vow sets the course of the nation, and they're heading towards judgment. It really seals their course. And so in ancient Israel, who would have said it? It would have been the leaders, because only they can speak for the nation, only they can set the course of the nation. They would have done it in the capital city, that was Samaria. So for this harbinger to happen, what would have to happen is a leader of this land, now America, would have to speak a vow like this in defiance, linked to 9/11, the strike, and publicly, and would have to do it from the capital, the nation's capital. So the question is, what leader in the right mind would do this? Because this is pronouncing judgment on the nation. This is setting the course of defiance, that this is the nation. America is in danger of judgment. It's the nation in defiance of God. But the eerie thing is, it happens. The day after 9/11, America is going to give its response to what happened. So it's very crucial. It's matching up with ancient Israel. And so what happens is, the Congress gathers on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and there's one man appointed to give the nation's response. He's the Senate Majority Leader, and he comes to the Senate floor and he presents America's response. And at the end of the speech, he reaches his finale, his pinnacle, with this. He says, "There is a scripture in Isaiah which I think speaks to all of us at times like this." And then he says, and out of his mouth from Capitol Hill comes the ancient vow of judgment from Capitol Hill. The bricks have fallen, he says, but we will rebuild with dressed stone. He speaks of the tree cut down, but we will plant cedars in their place. Out of 30,000 verses, he chooses the one that is pronouncing judgment and is also matching up. He doesn't know what he's doing. Everything is matching perfectly. He has no idea what he's doing, and he says it, and then he says, this is what we will do. In other words, America, he's saying, that we will do Isaiah 9:10. In other words, we're going to follow in the same path as ancient Israel, which is ominous because that set the course of judgment. He's saying we're not going to repent. We're going to try to come back stronger than ever, which is exactly what America tried to do without coming back to God. And that's an ominous thing. And the thing is that he's speaking prophetically. I mean, and people say, well, how can someone speak? Well, Caiaphas did too, you know, and because of his position, it says. So same thing. And he speaks about the tree that is struck down. He doesn't even know there is a tree that's just being discovered that day. He speaks of the stone is going to go up. That's going to happen 3 years later. He speaks of all these things prophetically, without realizing what he's saying. And this becomes a matter of the congressional record of America. This was the response, Isaiah 9:10, and he doesn't know it's all being fulfilled. And so it all sums up. And we won't go into it, but he's not the only one. 3 years later, it's going to happen. Another American leader is going to pronounce the vow of judgment, the same vow, making ancient Israel the vow of America on the anniversary of 9/11. And then it's even going to, a time later, it's going to be another person, the President of the United States, will utter the central vow of this before the entire world. So it's ominous. You know, it's amazing because it's like, some people say, well, this is scary. Well, in a sense, but in another sense, it's God's in charge. He's showing that everything is in charge. And this is a wake-up call if we've ever had one. Yeah, because a few things. America, first of all, was founded to be a new Israel. I mean, at the very beginning, not that it replaces Israel, but it was founded to be a new Israel. The Puritans who did, they said this will be, we're going to model it after Israel. Thanksgiving is modeled after Sukkot. I mean, it's all, they were going to speak Hebrew, you know. So it's interesting that the very foundation is this thing. And the Puritan founders, they actually prophesied. They said, if we follow God's ways, as you just said there, if America follows God's way, or this Commonwealth follows God's way, we'll be the most blessed of nations. And it's exactly what happened. Everything that happened in history, America has been the most blessed of nations as much as it followed God. So it's as if God did give a special favor there. So now, as America is turning from God, we are now reenacting Israel's turn from God. And so then we are watching the same specific signs that were given to Israel. So there is a mystery there. And I mean, and the reason why they sought to found America as a new Israel is because of the Bible being the church, being that we are linked to Israel to begin with. There's always been this special link with America and Israel in a million ways. It's in our DNA, you know. And so yes. And the other thing is that provides the context, because what's happening is just what happened in ancient Israel. As they turned, they went into sexual immorality. We see that in America. They defied God and his ways. They threw out his laws, we see that in America. They offered up their children as sacrifices to Molech. We see that in America. People say, well, how can you say that? They offered up thousands. We offer up millions with abortion. So we are the same kind of thing that happened even in the days of Elijah, where all of a sudden they started they're calling good evil and evil good. What they used to know as moral, they said now this is wrong, and what they used to say is wrong is now moral. They began persecuting the people of God. So we're watching the same exact dynamic. So it kind of makes sense that we're now seeing in the Harbinger is that the same signs and prophetic manifestations are coming on our soil. So yes, I think that's all part of the mystery. I think that it's the time. I think we're in trouble, you know, and we must be at a critical point, because I have no question that this is the time that the Harbinger was supposed to come out. I mean, I got it. It was a developing kind of revelation, starting from 9/11, then 2005, and then with the economic collapse, which is also all part of this mystery. But it only came out now. It's only coming out now, actually, just in the last 2 months. So I believe it is for now. I believe, and I think most believers sense this, that America's in trouble and is at a critical point. And most non-believers say America's in trouble. There's something not right, you know. And so I believe it. God knows. I mean, God only knows. But it is for such time as this. Well, there's more that I haven't put in the Harbinger that'll probably be put into something that comes. But the message of the future, I mean, because it's not, and just for those who haven't read it, it isn't. It begins with 9/11, but it just starts there, and it affects everything from what we're still living in right now economically, and everything we're dealing with. If you go past Isaiah 9:10, which is the key verse, the next verse begins everything else, which interesting is Isaiah 9:11, and it begins really talking about judgment. And it's not that we have to do exactly as them, because it's not exactly the same, but the pattern is. So, you know, there's all sorts of way that judgment comes, and the pattern is that if the nation rejects the warning of God, it's in mercy. He's trying to avoid something. So if the nation rejects it, another one comes, another calamity comes, and then another and another. And that can come in many forms, everything from natural disasters to man-made disasters to division, to decline, to attack, I mean, it speaks about fire on the land in that section. And it speaks about a continual thing. And 9/11 was just the beginning. Maybe we'll talk about the second shaking that came after that. But what it's saying is that if we don't turn, then the progression continues and will not stop. And one of the things I could say, you know, without any doubt whatsoever, is that if America doesn't turn back to God in some way, if there's not revival, if there's not a turning, then our crown as the head of nations, which is also one of the blessings God promised Israel, head of nations, will be removed, and sooner than later. The entire American age that we've known since we've grown up, all of us have been born into it, we'll see it end. And so that I believe will be one of the first things we see. Well, there's something There's something with that, because what happened is it's only when the nation realized, it's almost like they forgot. It's like there was an amnesia that came over that nation. They forgot where they came from. They forgot their covenant. And the same thing's happened with America. I mean, there's like a spiritual amnesia. And so it may take something like another 9/11 in some form to wake it up, but then connected, so one of the things the Harbinger, it is like the word, it's like connecting all these things. And so if something else happens, this is connecting it all together, that, hey, we have sinned, we have fallen. And America, though it's not, again, under the same things as Israel, nevertheless, there's this pattern. I mean, America had its own Sabbath, had Sunday, but they've eradicated that. That's just, these are all just kind of signs of a nation that keeps on driving God out, and that's what Israel did, but it suffered the consequences, and that's what we're watching. It's a dramatic story, but that we're watching, and it's a critical time. And it's affected, if we everything, not even our pocketbooks, everything goes back to these ancient mysteries. There's a mystery, and speaking of the law, because this is totally linked to what you said in a very kind of mystical way. There's the mystery of the shemitah, which is the Sabbath, not just the Sabbath day, but the Sabbath year. Every 7 years they had a rest. And this is a way of saying, we're putting you first, God, not money, not gain, but and on the last day of this Sabbath year, it's called the shemitah, last day, all debts were wiped away, all credits wiped away, the nation's financial accounts were wiped away, and it was a good thing. It's supposed to be a rest, no buying, no selling, good thing, but as the nation turned away from God and his law and turned away from his ways, they stopped observing this. They said, we want money, we're not going to rest for you. They drove him out of their life. And what happens is the shemitah comes back at them. The Sabbath year comes back as a sign of judgment. They're taken 70 years into captivity because that's the number of shemitahs, or Sabbath years, they didn't observe. So what could this have to do with America? It's the shemitah as a sign of judgment against a nation that has driven God out of its life. So America's not under that law, but here is the sign. The shemitah is a 7-year cycle. And so here's the mystery. You have 9/11, you have the first shaking, but then you have another shaking of America. The next one in the Harbinger is also filled with ancient mysteries. It's from that, is that the entire economy collapses. It's now the very power of America. We're still not recovered from this, what's happening. And so that happens in 2008. That's 7 years, the second shaking, 7 years from the first. In September of 2008, 7 years to the month. Second week of September, 7 years to the week. On the day that America's observing the 7th anniversary of 9/11, the second calamity is being set in motion. But it gets even more kind of eerie and mind-boggling, because the greatest day of this collapse that we all went through came at the end of September. The stock market crashed, in the greatest crash in American history, over 700 points. And what day did that happen on? It happened on the day of the shemitah, the day appointed to judge a nation's financial realm that has driven God out of its life, that has put money ahead of God. It wipes out all the accounts, wipes out credit debt. The Great Recession keeps wiping out everything. And if you go back 7 years, it's a 7-year mystery, it gets even more mind-boggling, because that brings you to the month of 9/11, but it also brings you to the other greatest collapse of Wall Street in the history of America. It happens a few days after 9/11, and it happened on September 17th. But it's not the Western calendar. Strip it away. You have the biblical calendar, and what day did it happen on? It happened on the same exact day of the shemitah, the day of the judgment of the two greatest, this is mind-boggling, the two greatest crashes in American history up to those days happened on the exact day given to Israel that wiped away the nation's accounts, and happened how far apart? Exactly 7 years to the Hebrew day, to even the hours, because they had to finish before sundown. Well, the stock market closes like 4 o'clock, same time that Orthodox Jews are celebrating this shemitah. It's mind-boggling, and it happened on the actual, it's only once in 7 years, it happened on the actual once in 7 year one. So it's mind-boggling, and this was the sign, and the shemitah in Hebrew, it can mean release, but it can also mean to let collapse. And God is saying, listen, if you don't come back to me, your blessings are from me, then I will allow all your blessings to collapse, even the very power of America itself. That's a mind-boggling thing. And I'll throw in one more, and that is, there's a principle, and it's all this thing about Israel and America, that there's a principle that when calamity comes, this warning or this judgment, it returns to the nation's ground of dedication or consecration. And that was the Temple Mount. And that Solomon dedicated the temple. They gathered the people. They prayed days of prayer. He prayed for the future. If they ever turn away from you, God, have mercy on them. Well, it happened. And then years later, when the judgment came to Israel, it came to the Temple Mount, same place where they had been dedicated to God. God was saying, hey, that you've broken the covenant, this is the sign, and I'm calling you to return to where you have fallen from. So here's the principle. The judgment returns to the nation's ground of dedication. What could this have to do with America? Well, there is a mystery here, that the very first day of America, its foundation day, wasn't 1776, it was April 30th, 1789, when for the first time we had a president and a government. America as we know it now came into existence. If America ever turns away from God, its blessings are going to be removed, even protection, all that. So what happens? He brings the government on foot to a place to dedicate America to God, the future, the government, all the generations. They pray in this little stone chapel. If we can find out where that is, we have a mystery, the mystery ground of America. Where was it? It was in the capital city. It wasn't Washington, D.C. It was New York City, the first capital of America, New York City. Where? Lower Manhattan. Where exactly did they go? They went and they dedicated America to God at ground zero. That America's consecration ground is ground zero. The ancient principle of Israel, the calamity returns to the nation's ground of dedication. And it's on that ground where the harbingers were appearing, where the sycamore grew on the soil of America's ground, consecration ground. And that's where all these things took place. And on that day, a shockwave goes forth from ground zero, the consecration ground, strikes another place, which is Federal Hall, where Washington was sworn in and where he gave that prophetic warning. That's like the foundation, and it struck the foundation and cracked the foundation. And then around ground zero, all the buildings were destroyed or just totally ruined, except one was protected. It was called the Miracle of 9/11. And that place was the little stone chapel where America was dedicated in prayer to God that day. And the reason why they say it was protected is there was an object that blocked the force of it, and that object was the harbinger. It was the sixth harbinger, the sycamore tree, protected. And that's the point of the harbinger and the harbingers. And the book and the message is that it's not that America be judged. It's to save America. It's to wake up America. It's that America return to God. And God says, it's when Solomon was praying that day, and then he went back and God answered his prayer. And that's when God said to Solomon, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, then I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sin, I'll heal their land. That came, it's all linked to that mystery ground. And so that is the message. It's not only for America that it needs to return, but it's if my people, revival begins with us. We can't just say them. We're supposed to be the lights. If it's so dark, then we're not doing our job. We're supposed to be the salt. If it's so rotten, we're not doing our job. So God is calling us. The time is late, and God is putting a greater call. We are called to live what we are called to live. We are to be the lights. We need to spread the word. We need to be watchmen on the walls. We need to sound the trumpet, sound the shofar. The harbinger is a shofar call, is a trumpet sound. We need to do that. The key words are my people, and the other key word is if.